So quantity versus quality, how does that affect how you approach barbecue? This is something that I've thought about as I've transitioned from cooking on smaller smokers, the charcoal grill, and then moving into something larger like the offset smoker here. It's quite a bit different when you're cooking one rack of ribs for yourself or your family versus doing 60 rack of ribs for an event. And you start to notice things that aren't necessary, and you make some compromises on how you prepare, because if you don't, then you're gonna compromise something else down the line. And what I mean by that is, if you spend an inordinate amount of time preparing one rack of ribs, getting the perfect mustard rub on it before you put the sauce on it, before you put the rub on it, and then you multiply that by 60, you're now taking a couple of hours to prep. So what I've done is I've experimented with what things can you do without really suffering that much, and what's the trade-off. Because one of the biggest challenges when you're doing a larger quantity is the timing of everything. If you're taking 15 minutes to prepare each cut of meat that's going on the smoker, then it's just, the management becomes a lot more difficult. If every 15 minutes a different piece of meat is going on, then the timing of things can be a little bit skewed if it's been an hour and a half between the first one and the last one. So one of the things that I've tried is, I know people will use a binder on the meat before they put the rub on, typically mustard, something that over time a lot of the flavor cooks out, so you don't really taste the mustard, but it's there as a substance for the rub to stick to. It's messy, it takes a lot of time. If you're doing one rack of ribs, maybe it works and it's fine, but in higher volumes it starts to get to a point where it's just a lot of management. And what I found at the end of the day is I've actually made changes to my rub to where it sticks to the meat a little bit better without needing a binder. So the dry rub, it has some more salt and some more sugar into it. For ribs specifically is mainly what I'm talking about here. So if the purpose of the binder is to get the rub to stick, my thought is, how can I make the rub to stick without using a binder? So I've adapted the rub that I use, and it works really well. And then making sure the meat is a little bit warmer, so not pulling it straight out of the fridge, like letting it sit out for a half hour or so. When it's a little bit warmer, the rub's going to start to dissolve a little bit faster and stick a little bit better. So you start to come up with things like that help offset maybe some of these other tricks that you would use if you were just doing a smaller quantity. You start to realize pretty quickly what's important and what's not. If you go to a competition barbecue competition where you're doing your four meats, your brisket, your pork, your ribs, and your chicken. The guys doing chicken, they're pulling every single skin off of the chicken thigh. They're putting seasoning between the skin and the thigh. They're cutting the skin perfect so it fits back, like remanufacturing this chicken thigh with skin on it. Which, if you're doing a couple of chicken thighs, maybe that makes that last 2 or 3% difference that you need to win a competition, but just totally unrealistic if you're trying to do 400 chicken thighs, to feed a crowd. So just things like that are fun to experiment with. They make good social media content when you do it. Maybe in a competition setting, you're trying to get that little bit of an edge over your competitors. But really, if you were to sit your average person down and hand them a slice of competition brisket and a slice of brisket that was made along with 30 other briskets on a smoker, 9 times out of 10 they're probably not going to know that much of a difference. So so it is interesting, the things that you can get away with not having to do. One, when you've got a machine that just does a really good job of cooking the food, and two, when you are working in a larger quantity, just how important the timing of everything is, and you can't afford the extra time that it takes to do some of these other tricks that you might do if you were just doing one piece for a competition, or just something to impress your guests at you know, Thanksgiving dinner or something like that. Anyway, that's just a thought I had on the difference between quantity versus quality. The other thing, now that I finished the video, I'm going to keep going. Another thing with doing this high quantity of food, I had a couple people, interestingly enough, 2 different people that come to mind that commented, one I think one to me personally and one just through social media, that they have a brisket that's in the freezer because it's an expensive cut of meat and they are afraid that they're going to mess it up. So rather than cook it, they put it in the freezer. And my thought is you've got to be okay with ruining a few pieces of meat to get through that fear of ruining a few pieces of meat. And cooking a lot of things, like cooking a high quantity of food, is what really got me to that point where I've done, you know, if I load this with brisket, I'm cooking more brisket in one event on this than I'd cooked in 10 years prior. So you learn a lot faster when you're doing a higher quantity of things. So I would encourage anyone that is trying to get over that fear of, I just spent $90 in this piece of brisket. Be okay messing it up. Just say, I'm going to do one a weekend for the next 4 weekends. I guarantee you're going to make a lot more improvement and dial it in than you will trying to just get that first one perfect. The first one's, it's going to be edible. Trust me, it's hard to mess up a brisket to a point where it's inedible. But don't expect it to be perfect, and be okay with it not being perfect, but take notes and make changes. The next one will be better, the next one will be better, and after 3 or 4 times of doing it, you'll start to be pretty happy with the results. So just another plug for not being afraid to just do a lot of cooking. And that's really how I got to the point where I was confident with really throwing anything on the barbecue, because I'd done enough to where I knew what to look for, and yeah, I was starting to get some pretty good results after just out of necessity, just cooking a lot of different things. So I think, to recap, focusing first on quantity will automatically help your quality improve. And then there are things that you might do differently when you're cooking a lot of things at once than you would if you're just doing individual pieces. So yeah, so get out there and try it. It's a lot of fun.